Good afternoon. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board of Work session. It is Monday, September 25th, 2023. It is 2:36 p.m. The session is set to go until 3 p.m. and we do have a hard stop at 3. This is a hybrid meeting. We are at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110 for public virtual attendance. You may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Chai Messer. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell and Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder. And today we will be discussing the LMD status update briefing. And
I'm gonna turn it straight over to Rob.
okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Rob Gelder, Assistant County Manager. And I apologize in advance. Given a hard stop, my inner New Yorker could come out and I could talk really quickly. So tell me to slow down if I'm going too quickly. But I just wanted to start with this is actually probably one of the first assignments that the board gave me was to consider the possibility of transitioning the support for the lake management districts to another department within the county apart from Public Works. Over the past 3 months, I've had the opportunity to meet with internal staff to kind of work through some scenarios, look through different options, et cetera. Did have the opportunity to meet with some representatives of the 4 current LMDs or soon-to-be LMDs as well towards the end of June. One of the ideas that we spent some time over the summer exploring was, especially for newer forming LMDs, and not necessarily knowing what the plan or prescription might be, is there another way to kind of back into a budget and its operations? And we started to go down the path of developing an a la carte menu. One of the things as we were going through that process, or the conclusion, unfortunately, was realizing that that was going to be really difficult, if not impossible, currently within our constraints to implement that type of an accounting and recording of a level of support to the LMDs. So what you have before you is what I created was a basic resourcing and policy decision matrix. Just a way for me to initially take some of the ideas, put them down on paper, and start to explore some of the pros and cons. So that's what is the majority of the packet that you have before you. And so I'll quickly walk through some of that, or really it's encapsulated on the second page of your briefing document, being the sort of the various options. And I'll walk us through those, if I may. The first option kind of being status quo. That was pretty much nothing changed. That really wouldn't change ultimately the relationship that we have in place or the work program, and doesn't address the structural concerns which have been identified by stakeholders or the fiduciary costs of the fund or program management. This second one was basically the assignment was to find another department. And if we don't really look at sort of, while it gives a fresh start, the faces change potentially, it doesn't address the structural issues or the structural needs behind some of the current concerns that have popped up. The third one being a hybrid model. As I was going through the process and having conversations with Public Works, CPED, and Public Health and Social Services, specifically environmental health, I came down to the conclusion that if it were to switch county departments, environmental health would seem to be the most logical, just because they already do a body of work around water quality. This could be a good nexus and there could be potentially good synergies there. How we end up with this hybrid model is that, unfortunately right now, given where they are relative to staffing and replacing the management in environmental health post-retirements, they didn't have the management capacity to take it on. So one of the ideas that emerged was, if the aquatic resource specialists kind of moved over there, then potentially how could they be overseen and potentially going out for a contract to actually provide that day-to-day management of the program. which led us to really option 4, which is the recommendation that I'm bringing forward today, and I'm asking for board concurrence to actually start going down the path. And that is for a fully contracted model. And that specifically is looking at, in my conversations with the LMDs, and I know folks have had opportunities to meet with the commissioners independently as well, that one theme that I heard was really a desire to have a certain level of autonomy, and try to eliminate some of the complexity in the implementation of the programs. And when I say programs, that's really 4 separate programs, right? Each LMD steering committee is coming up with a work plan and a treatment for the respective lakes. So how can you do that? Find economies of scale and potentially kind of minimize the amount of handoffs to simplify life for everyone involved. And that was, so the recommendation is to go out to some fully contracted model. And that could probably look a couple of different ways. One would be actually going out for an RFP to select a contractor to do the overall management of the work program for each one of the LMDs. And I would say that probably economies of scale can be achieved at this one RFP with 4 scopes of work. Or the other one was actually a model that popped up in conversations a couple of weeks ago, was really looking at, is there a possibility of using an entity like work support, which they were utilized, it's my understanding, in the early days of sort of standing up the BCB, or the TPA, one of those two. And could that be a resource that, in which case we would contract with work support, and then the county would just be able to transfer the funds, LMD funds specifically to them. They would then be able to partner with each one of the LMDs to actually do the rest of that operational piece of it. All that said, what it boils down to, and I think I'll use Mr. Halverson's phrase, that the devil's in the details, right? Because if we are sort of at a fork in the road, right? Either keep things the way they are or potentially try something different that achieves hopefully some of the deliverables that we are trying to achieve, whether it's through greater autonomy, just clarifications, et cetera. But we need to figure out how to do that. And so I've only gone down so many paths to date, just because I wanted the board direction and concurrence before actually taking the time to work with staff, figure out what a transition plan would be over the next few months. I did receive some correspondence from the LMDs. They were able to get together, do an online meeting a week ago. And so they were going through the proposal and actually had presented some questions for clarification, which I've not had an opportunity to get all of those answers, because it will take further conversation with the LMDs to find that that right path is going forward. But some of the questions were just really, in the matrix, you'll see that I recommend finalizing the administrative rules, which obviously would look very different under a contracted model than the status quo. One of the ideas there was not only kind of finalizing that, but potentially creating some operating procedures that could be put into place as we move forward. Some of the other questions that are out there were relative to who holds the permits. Those likely would need to stay with the county, potentially transferred to environmental health, but we'd have to get clarity on that. Other questions are related to procurement and the paying of invoices, et cetera. All of those are logistical details that we would actually have to iron out as if the board provides direction to go in that path, then we would come up with that plan and work with the LMDs to actually get to an implementation. And that leaves hopefully time for questions.
Thank you. Okay. A little bit of time for questions. Commissioner Edwards.
You made mention that the admin rules would be very different. So So I take it they're not done yet, what that difference would be.
No,
So that's yet to come.
I did not edit those because I would say whatever, they would be edited based on whatever direction the board gave.
And then you've got checked here for our briefing today, decision needed. You don't have optimal time frame. I'm curious, okay, now we've had 15 minutes to go over this and to hear your presentation. And the difference between hearing what you're talking about here, and I didn't get a chance to talk to you myself about it, but I did talk to some of the lake management people about the possibility that we might go that way. So, but I'm trying to figure out what's the decision that you think you need right now?
Well, the decision would be if the board agrees that as opposed to just shifting the program in its current state and form to another county department, but potentially entertaining going forward with a contracted model for support, which is not too dissimilar from potentially how other counties do it. That would be the decision or the direction I'd be asking from the board today, because it will take time to implement
Well,
over the next few months.
From my perspective, and I'm kind of embroiled in this whole thing. I don't think that 15 minutes and then make a decision based on, I think Commissioner Menzer said something earlier about what we've got going on this afternoon from noon on, you know, we've had some pretty heavy stuff. I just don't, I think this is too important to make a quick snap decision without maybe talking to all the parties, get a little more sense, what did you mean by this, that, you know, not 5 minutes and answering questions or something, but
Sure.
let's find out a little more about it, and if we're not up against the time frame that has to be today, I didn't know if you had something in mind, but, so I think we could have another work session on this, a little farther down for more discussion.
Mhm.
We've heard from you, but we'd be able to have a little more discussion for a period of time, and which probably the lake folks would want to be around and hear that at least. But maybe even involve them, I don't know, we can talk about that. So
Well,
I'm just not
definitely would
prepared to
recommend
make,
involving them.
pardon?
I would definitely would
Certain.
recommend involving.
I just don't think I'm ready to give direction at this point in time. Pretty soon, yeah, I kind of like where you're going, but
Commissioner,
it's
that's
just-
why I
little
met with
quick.
you a few weeks ago to share this concept.
Yeah.
So that today wasn't the first time necessarily.
Right, and I kind of wanted to hear this in a public venue.
Mhm.
I always like to hear things in public versus what we
Same.
talk about, so.
Yep.
That's kind of where I'm at, I don't know where my seatmates are, but I think it's a good step in the right direction.
Ready to approve the whole Grand Mountain Sudbury plan.
Well, that I've been
Parts
working
that
on
was supposed to
for
wait for
6
next year.
years. 6 years. This is a new
Um,
concept.
Can I ask a question about the hybrid?
Mhm.
Like, can you help me understand the hybrid versus the fully contracted?
Right, the hybrid was more that we have existing county staff person who would continue to serve in that role. But what we were missing was the actual day-to-day programmatic management. So it would be needing to contract out for that programmatic management that would work with the aquatic resource specialist. So it's kind of a hybrid, it's a little clunky, because you have to manage the contract to manage the
Yeah,
program.
and it has,
it's-
I would think it would have the potential for, duplication and overlap of,
Right.
not the best efficient use of the Lake LMD resources,
Correct.
maybe.
No, I think that potentially going to a contracted model, there's opportunities for, as I mentioned, economies of scale, but also eliminating some of, it's taking the program out of what would be more of a traditional government program that is based on the way we do accounting, the way we do cost recovery. It could be more of a standalone. And so it would be able to minimize its sort of overall budgetary administrative burden that we have policies in place to recover. But it'd be more of a fee for service, minus sort of what fees are would be allocated to the treasurer for doing collecting the assessments, as well as any administrative overhead that we would have to do directly, because we still are responsible as a county for the tracking, the financials, the paying, et cetera.
And
Unless that was contracted to a different provider as well.
one thing that causes me a hesitation, I understand the logical connection between the LMDs and environmental health, but unless I've not gotten an update, we don't have an environmental health director,
Correct.
which the timing of which would make me nervous to make a big shift like this, either to a brand new employee or somebody that's not there. You know, I mean, it doesn't seem like a good time to make a shift like that, especially if they were gonna completely manage it. So that's another factor in ways in favor of the contracted model, I guess.
Sure, and I think that depending on how it would be implemented, you know, the point of contact, depending on the level of internal support to the program remains, or what's actually, if it went to like org support, right? That the role of an internal point of contact would be diminished dramatically. So it becomes less moot as to which department it is, because you're not doing it necessarily for programmatic synergies.
So my question is in regards to the administrative rates on the fully contracted model, and kind of like what does that entail? And like, you know, it's to cover, you know, direct services, but just kind of like the breakdown on what is being envisioned on this.
So, I mean, obviously, depending on the path going forward, if it were org support, it would be very different because we would be doing a lot less. But if in the original idea was that it would be a level assessed at a rate to cover the point of contact time that would be attributed to supporting the programs, it would be the direct time that was related to procurement of contracts, to the payment of bills. Let's see what else. The financial reporting, any of those types of items, because even in that construct too, there would still be that time that would be used to take things through the board for budget amendments, for contract awarding, et cetera.
It all depends on how much we'd wanna contract out. Because we could, as Rob said, we could go with a model that is very much like the TBA or TCOM, TPA, the Tourism Promotion Area,
Oh, okay.
or TCOM 911, where we contract with, the county contracts with someone to manage the program, and we do some budget monitoring, but other than that, they pretty much run the program. And the county retains, in the contract with the TPA, we have a clause that up to 5% can be retained by the county for administrative purposes, but it's well below that number. I think the last time I looked was 2.5% that the county had. It's for processing warrants and passing the money through, and the cost of the treasurer to collect and pay out the money.
So then if we were to go with option 4, right, basically you would be exploring those two models and discussing those with the LMDs on those two possible avenues?
Trying to figure out exactly how we can make it work.
Because I think we ultimately would have to create what is that process flow, depending on which, if it's through a contractor, then there's a higher level of support from the county in terms of managing that. but at the same time, greater level of partnership with the LMD steering committees in terms of the day-to-day management of the contractors and their execution of the work, right? But if we went with a work support model, it would be even less. So we have to figure out which is actually the most viable path, and then identify everything that would need to be in place to support it, so it could be successful. Now, there are concerns, just really how quickly can we make this type of a transition. If the board gives direction to go down this path, if and when they do, then it makes a big difference as to how smoothly we can potentially, make the transition, and or what do we have to come up with interim steps just to facilitate that as well.
Well, I'm right there on option 4, and kind of reviewing those two different avenues and having those discussions with the LMD.
If Commissioner Edwards wants more time, I'm fine with that.
I don't know, because we need more time as much as, if those folks from the different LMDs all feel this is kind of the way to go, I mean, maybe we can initially look at it. I don't know at what point we actually, I don't know, we had hearings and took votes and everything to create these districts. I don't know if it's gonna take some of that to undo our involvement. Have we,
No.
nothing involved there?
No.
This is just kind of and I think this just provides Rob the opportunity to have those conversations with the LMD, look further into, what model really, kind of contracting model really works. I do not feel comfortable in remaining with the status quo. There's been a lot of frustration from the LMDs, and I don't, even though we're doing kind of the shift, right, which is what we're doing right now, again, that fresh start with new faces, but if nothing changes, then we're just gonna be in the same rut with a different whole set of people, and I'm just not interested in kind of continuing that. So, that's why for me, it's if we can look at these, give direction to Rob to look at these two different avenues and have those conversations with the LMDs, and see like how they feel about this proposal and presenting the two different kind of possible models, right? Knowing that there's still some details that need to be ironed out, but once there's a little bit more direction on the specifics of the two, then, we can start ironing out those details. But for me, that's kind of where I'm at. But if you need more time, again, I'm
No,
willing to, just like I
I'm
did.
actually, I think we're there as far as we're kind of exploratory, looking into it at that point.
Well, and the reason why I was asking for direction, because it will take staff time, and not just my time, but others as well, to kind of figure out all the answers to the questions. And so I don't want to go forward without having board support to actually dedicate that time.
Sure. Well, we'll see where it goes.
So then are you do you need
Sure.
more time
No,
or are you
no,
in support of
I'll go
exploring
with the board, yeah. I'm good.
option 4?
I'm kind of looking to see what kind of a closer to the end product we end up with, that's what. And I guess if we don't discuss it, we'll never get there, huh?
4 is fine, okay, so then that's the board direction. Okay, it is 3 p.m. We are adjourned.